Hey, good afternoon, everybody. We are back. It is Monday, May 20th, one day after Pentecost, and we are here on the Catholic Convert Show. Now, what I was not intending was to start off Monday in the spirit of being reactive, but it's just been a very eventful weekend, and people have seemed to have lost their collective minds. Unfortunately, that's just the way it is when you have the quote unquote journalistic practices of modern mainstream media. However, you've got me and you've got Ed here to sort through it all and
That's what we do.
maybe try to rock the boat a little bit, but I assure you it's purely for comedic purposes.
Yeah, exactly.
It has been a wild weekend. There was a lot of firsts uh, for me. Last night we had a dinner at the rectory, and it was, I would say, about a dozen or so families, with their kids. Not everyone had kids, but the kids got to run around and, they're playing cornhole. That quickly devolved into the kids throwing bean bags at each other the way we used to do pine cones. Uh, I think there was some croquet going on, some tag going on. 50s, 60s, 70s music playing that was mildly interrupted by the occasional Turkish wedding music that was left over in the priest playlist from the time we actually had a Turkish wedding at our parish. Uh, but overall, it was fun. You know, um, like I was talking to you before the show, I woke up this morning with a massive headache, and it's only because I had like four beers, two snifters of scotch. And I'm the guy that can have like three or four margaritas and never have any issue, right? I can walk a straight line. I can do backflips on the trampoline, no slurred speech, no nothing. I could walk a tightrope after margaritas like that. And I was not intoxicated last night. Had zero feelings of intoxication. But I woke up this morning and I felt like I had a feminist standing on my forehead. It was ridiculous.
The problem with that, Jeff, is that, and you're quickly finding out that you are becoming old like me.
you know, it's not going to be long until I'm jumping into like trying to rewind on my TiVo to see the number that I got to call to get my order of Flomax.
Exactly.
Dating myself a little bit with a reference to TiVo, but hey, it is what it is. I don't feel older. It's just sometimes things happen to my body that remind me that I'm not 21 anymore. But I'll take it with a grain of salt. I'm here. I'm alive. Uh, it only took two bottles of water for the headache to go away. And the kids slept in because we were out at the rectory till almost 10 last night. So they were exhausted. But unfortunately, the entire time we're having a good old time at the rectory, tons of laughter, conversation, and just fellowship, right? The heart and soul of any church community. People were online losing their minds over in true fashion, little quick snippets and clips of everything that our beloved Pope Francis had stated during a 60 Minutes interview. And it's like people haven't been paying attention to what the media does. You know, one particular thing was they cut the clip right at when he was talking about um, immigration. You know, that you must accept all of the immigrants in the true heart of compassion. And then they cut the clip off, right? They cut the clip off there. However, another one came out later. But everybody, of course, is going to have their own visceral initial reaction to that thing. But then they didn't even play the entire clip. His very next sentence was, but then you have to figure out what to do with them. And sometimes that means you have to send them back where they came from. However, every single decision needs to be based on being as humane as possible. But of course, the media is not going to show that until, until they get people to, be fully invested in watching the 60 minutes interview as soon as it comes out. They're like, oh, let's get them talking about it. We're going to increase our ratings. It is the oldest trick in the book. I know. I've been doing marketing for 5 years now. It's not even a long time. But in the marketing world, there's only so many fundamentals that you learn until you figure out, yeah, it's deceptive, persuasive practices. They're playing on your right brain, which is your emotional side. And as long as they can continue to trigger those and either reaffirm the beliefs you already have or try to throw a monkey wrench into your previously held beliefs, they're going to get you angry. They're going to get you emotional. They're going to make you reactive. And then you're like, oh, I can't wait to tune in. And so you go into watching these kinds of interviews just angry, waiting to stick a fork into the guy. And then you watch it and you're like, oh, I didn't know that was the rest of the statement. It's no different than anything else. They do it with uh, products that they're selling, and ultimately it's a product. Their show is a product. They're getting money from their sponsors based off of ratings, so forth and so on. But still, it doesn't change the fact that people are always going to be people. And when they flock to the Twitter sphere, see, I gotcha. Look at what Francis is trying to do. And it's gotten to the point when I see these knee jerk and ignorant reactions, it makes my eyes roll so hard that they make a noise. Like, I think I awoke my dog up this morning when I read one take. My eyes rolled so far back, and you just heard the scared my dog, ran out of the kitchen. It was ridiculous. But that's the case that we talked about before with anything, anytime our Pope utters a single syllable, it sends the people who are very anti Catholic into, oh, I can't wait to post a gotcha. And it'll send other Catholics, and yes, I'm going to call them out too, into that weird doom and gloom mode where they're no better than the like weirdo evangelicals that start screaming, the end is nigh. It's a sign of the times. It's a sign of the end is coming. Every time a tornado touches down in Tornado Alley, Oklahoma, it's purely reactive. And it's like everyone wants a black and white, this is this and this is this, based off of something that you've zero context to. And so they immediately jump to these reactions. And to quote one of my favorite guys on Catholic radio, Lino Rulli, it's just dumb. I mean, it is, but it's clickbait, it's rage bait, and it's been the way of modern journalism that, it's just continued to expand in that same way for years, decades now. Everybody follows the same protocol, and it's just wild to me that no one's gotten wise to it yet. Now, there were some things that came out, and I do not have the entirety of the context to what Pope Francis said because I don't think the interview's been released yet. And I've got other stuff to do than just, watch 60-minute clips. Um, he was talking about how he thinks the heart is fundamentally good. Now it states in the book of Jeremiah that that the heart is inherently wicked, which goes right into our fallen nature as what was caused by the fall from God with Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden. And you know what? It's okay to say that if that is the only context that is available and that is present within such a statement, then Pope Francis is incorrect. Gasp. Shock. Do you mean that the Pope is not infallible? Why, yes, I do. Because people who seem to state or claim otherwise have the same level of reading comprehension as 99% of people on social media, or their catechesis was extremely poor if they even bothered to learn the catechism at all and actually figure out what papal infallibility means. It does not mean that the Holy Father, the Pope, any Pope, is 100% infallible in thought, word, action, or even character. Like our Pope Francis goes to confession, I think every single day. I remember hearing him talk about how he left the confessional where he was hearing confession to go to confession before returning to the confessional because in hearing the confession, he had sinful thoughts about what he was hearing. And he was like, no, I'm not even in a state of grace to hear confession. So the Pope himself going to confession should automatically be a clue for anyone that can see 2 plus 2. Even he does not think he is infallible. He is a flesh and blood sinner, just like all the rest of us. And papal infallibility has only been invoked twice since 1854. That was for the Immaculate Conception under Pius IX, and then the Assumption of Mary, which was in 1950 with Pius X. It has never been invoked again since then because it's not some, well, you know what, I'm just going to call this infallible. It's not one of those things. And of course, there's the technicality that papal infallibility is used all the time during the canonization of saints, but it's not like, hey, we're invoking the infallibility. Someone's just being canonized, right? And you're not going to say, no, they're not. But it's still not, I guess it's technically papal infallibility. But the Pope cannot just invent new teachings. The Pope cannot just say, hey, we're changing doctrine. The church doctrine has not been changed or altered in 2000 plus years since the conception of the church on the cross and its birth at the original Pentecost. Right? It's never changed. Now, it has been added to. However, each and every single addition cannot and will not contradict anything that is already in the doctrine. And so you see these people trying to argue, well, the church just invented the belief that Mary was conceived immaculately. No, we did not. Yeah, they did it in 1854. No, they did not. It was a belief that was held by nearly every single Catholic on earth for 2,000 ish years. And the only thing that Pope Pius IX did was make it an official part of the church doctrine. That's what papal infallibility does. It makes it an official part of the doctrine. You know, we could have a pope in 50 years from now, Pope Alexander the 43rd or whatever comes up of it, and he can say, we are going to add to the doctrine that Muppets are holy. I don't know, something ridiculous, right? And it can't happen. No, it's not because it contradicts every single other thing that, in regards to one, inanimate objects having souls, and the entire nature and limitations of what papal infallibility entails. But again, we're subjected to the whims and incredibly annoying takes from people that have zero to very little understanding of what Catholic theology entails. And yeah, there's my rant for this Monday afternoon. It's enough to drive you nuts. Like, why do you drink so much during the day, Jeff? Well, let me get started.
That's you bring up a lot of good points there, though, and I think that that's one of the things that I see on social media that bothers me the most is a misunderstanding of the phrase papal infallibility. And also because you look at other Christian denominations, and I'm not going to profess to be an expert on any of them, but just by things that have changed in certain churches over the last few years, it seems to me that when there's a desire to change a church teaching on something, they get together, they have meetings, they present their thoughts, and the church elders or whatever their board of decision makers is called will then vote on it, and then they can change the direction of a church teaching in whatever, like you said, denomination it is. And people, I think, are under the misconception that it's the same with the Catholic Church, that we can change something that has been taught by the church for 2,000 years if enough people are behind that change. And no, it doesn't work that way. And like, I was glad that you mentioned that nothing that is said can contradict what has been in place already, and that's very key.
That
And you had even mentioned the Immaculate Conception and the Assumption, and these are things that typically what I've been told is that when it gets to the point where people are questioning a Catholic belief, something that is proven to be true, uh, when the church feels that it's necessary to make a specific dogma, to say yes, this is what the church teaches, we always have, we always will, and here, if it'll make it easier for you to understand, we it is now dogma, church dogma. And that's the case with the Assumption and the Immaculate Conception, that these are not things that just came out of the blue. Some pope wasn't sitting around playing gin rummy and said, oh, let's change what the church teaches about Mary. No, that's not the case at all. It was just that people were confused. Some people were confused. Some people were saying things that were incorrect about what the church teaches. So the church says, well, let's make this official. Let's make sure that everyone understands clearly what the church teaches on this particular thing. And um, you're talking. I mean, I don't know if you watched that 60 Minutes situation. I haven't watched 60 Minutes in years, and I
See, I
certainly
don't
wasn't
even
going to
know if
watch
it's
that.
actually released yet. I just know that they've been teasing clips
I
of it.
think I think it was last night's episode. I could be wrong, but like I said, I haven't watched it since I used to watch it with my dad back in the day to see what was going on in Vietnam and stuff. But uh, so but it's true. But you have to you with the way the media is today, you have to understand that there are going to be leading questions that are offered up to someone like the Pope. There is going to be creative editing with responses that he may have, because there are a number of people. It's so funny because so many people have take issue with the Catholic Church, but they are dying for the church to say something that they would agree with, and so they will take a little snippet and run with it. I mean, it's been especially with this Pope, because he does tend to, in my mind, sometimes speak very ambiguously about certain things, and people will say, "Oh,
100%
the
agree.
church," and so the people will say, the Pope the Pope says the Catholic Church now teaches this, the Catholic Church now allows that, and all these other things, and that's not the case. And from the snippets I saw in commercials and things like that, yeah, it was obvious that the interviewer was trying to lead the Pope with some of the questioning that took place. And if listen, if I want to know what the Catholic Church teaches on something, I'm not going to tune into 60 Minutes. I'm going to open up my catechism, or I'm going to
Yeah.
talk to my
And
parish
to be
priest.
honest, I'm not
You
even
know what
going
I
to
mean?
listen to what the Pope says in an interview
No,
on a news show or with whatever random
exactly.
journalist, because Pope Francis is what, 84, 85 years old? ish.
Yeah.
I'm not exactly sure. I know he's well into his
He's
mid
up there.
80s.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm not even going to listen to him answering questions on some random news interview from whether it's a mainstream platform or just some independent journalist with like an iPhone 12 or something, filming the thing. What I will do is I will go to the official source of the official teachings of the church. And then I can read it and go, oh, this is what the church teaches. And is there any way at all that what Pope Alexander the 493rd was saying in this interview um, is directly contradicting this? If the answer is yes, well, then he's either mistaken, he misunderstood the question, or he's outright thinking, I gave the answer that I thought best, being a non English speaker natively. And in my mind, the nuance that I'm intending to be conveyed is already implied. So anyone with a half a brain cell should understand it. But of course, that's never the case, right? So, yeah, what was the first option that I chose on that? He's probably mistaken. Okay, then he's mistaken, you know. But people, I think we worship the Pope or we pray to the Pope or we seek salvation through the Pope. Look, to put it as respectfully as possible, the Pope is just a man, just like our priests are just men. We don't have faith in the Pope. We don't have faith in our priests. Our faith is in God. Our faith is in Jesus Christ. And the Trinity is the only infallible thing in all of existence and ever will be, right? And so when we talk about things like papal infallibility, it is in regards to is whoever is stating it, whichever pope is pope at the time, speaking in accordance with the already approved and believed doctrine and dogma of Christ's one and holy apostolic and Catholic Church? The answer is yes, then of course it's infallible. If it's just the opinion of a human who goes, he goes, it's my opinion that people should do this, but that's not what the church teaches, so they can't do it. He can literally say that and admit that he's wrong in his opinion, but that's just his opinion.
Yeah, and you know what's people have to understand that anything that the
That's
Pope would
asking
have
a lot,
said.
Ed.
What's that? That's what
I
I'm
said that's
asking a lot, yeah.
asking a lot.
But anything that the Pope would have said, on 60 Minutes last night or in an interview with some Italian magazine or whatever is as binding as anything you and I say on this podcast. I mean, that's just the truth.
No, no, no. We're completely infallible in what we're saying as well. When I said that people had poor reading comprehension, that is dogma.
All right. Okay, YouTube, slap that warning on this episode. You know,
But yeah, I mean, a guy giving an opinion that differs from what scripture states. Okay. Well, then he's just got a wrong opinion. But the fate of the Catholic Church does not rest in the hands of the Pope. If it did, I promise you that we wouldn't have made it through 266 of them.
absolutely, absolutely. Yeah,
You
I
know,
don't know.
I don't
But
understand the doom and gloom that even Catholics try to jump to. The Pope is destroying the church. Like, there's nothing that can destroy the church. Okay, did you like forget that part of the catechism? That's in like RCIA 101. Like, go
Yeah.
back, and RCIA starts again in the fall if you guys want to go take a refresher.
Yeah, I think even among Catholics, there's a misunderstanding regarding the Pope and his position, um, and uh, the weight that can be placed on things that he says on a day to day basis. I think there's just, I mean, it's I will admit, it it is a bit of a complicated situation if you know if you're not from if you haven't studied what it is to be Pope in regards to the Catholic Church. I think I can understand people being confused and thinking that if the Pope goes on 60 Minutes and says blank, that starting Monday morning, 1.4 billion people are completely changing their lives to match what the Pope said last night. And I think that there are people that are under that misapprehension and that misunderstanding. And but luckily, guys like us, we know better.
Yeah, because we've got that the infallibility of authority on YouTube and Spotify.
Those are the only two places where you do find infallibility. Yes.
Right, right, right. Uh, but another thing, my priest and I were talking about, uh, standing around watching, the kids run around and play, was exactly this: how people are going to twist and despair and lose their minds, and the whole thing, makes both of our skins crawl when you think of just the incessant rhetoric that'll be popping out from it from people who can't probably spell theology, but we got to talking about who we thought would be the next pope, because he and I both agree that it's we're both looking forward to seeing how things shake out with whatever the next uh, iteration of Peter's chair ends up being. And we were talking about Cardinal Pierre Battista Pizzaballa, and he is probably the most popular for right now. Um, he's the Latin Patriarch of Jerusalem, and honestly, he's got a really cool last name. It'd be great if he did become Pope, and then but if he does become Pope and he takes the name like Saint John, Pope John the 24th or something like that, we could literally call him Papa John with a last name like Pizzaballa. The possibilities are endless. We could call him Papa John if he takes John the 24th. And if he never becomes Pope, but when he reaches the age of, I believe it's 85 for bishops, when they have to hand in their conditional uh, resignation for retirement, and whether or not the Pope accepts it or whatever. Maybe he goes to New York, and maybe he opens up a pizza spot called uh, Padre Pizza Balla. That would be awesome too.
That would be fun. I think right there, reason enough, reason enough for him to become Pope.
Reason enough. But no, seriously, he has been indicated that as one of the more popular choices, um, when Pope Francis, uh, God forbid it's anytime soon, passes away. Uh, and it's I mentioned Cardinal Sarah, and my priest was like, I love him. I've met him, but I don't know if he can get enough traction because he is very hardcore traditional, right? I don't know if the College of Cardinals is ready for that guy yet, But it
I
would
would
be
love to
interesting.
see. But it would be very interesting, but it ain't gonna happen.
Well, and my priest said last night, but it would be. I mean, if you think about it, white looks really good on black. So we can do that. We can,
Well,
we can,
there you go.
we can get him in there. But it doesn't matter what happens in the long run. The church doesn't think in decades. The church doesn't think in days or months. The church thinks and moves in centuries. It thinks and moves in millennia. So anything any pope could ever do that was gloriously holy or provocative and heretical and shameful or whatever, it is a tiny, tiny drop in the context of the entirety of the Catholic Church. But it's the human side of people that they can't think in terms of eternity. It's beyond our grasp. They can't think in terms of centuries. They can't think in terms of millennia because no human is ever going to experience that. The church has stood through all of that, regardless of the countless scandals, regardless of the corruption that we had from popes selling indulgences or popes buying the papacy, or I can't remember exact one. You could correct me if I'm wrong on the church history, but there was two. There was like a grandfather or like an uncle and a nephew, and they went back and forth with the papacy back in I think it
Mhm.
was like the 1300s, maybe. I don't know. It's been a long time since I went through that story, but somehow
Yeah.
we're still here.
Yeah.
The spoiler is that we win in the end because we're with God and God is with us, and God doesn't lose. It's even written in the book. God wins in the end. We're on the winning team when we're with God.
That's right.
So it doesn't really matter if you lose a couple of yards in the second quarter or if, oh, there's a ball fumbled. So what? Doesn't matter. We still win in the end. And so for Catholics out there to go into this doom and gloom, the end is near, the church is falling apart kind of mode, it's kind of a slap in the face to the very thing that is true about the Catholic Church.
Yeah. And you bring up a very good points there about there being in our history uh, some popes that were not so good. And
So,
but
yeah,
again,
not
y-
so
you
good.
know,
We'll say it that way.
not so good. I was trying to think of what's the politically correct way of saying it. I
They
mean,
were
no,
less than.
there were some bad dudes in there, but again, that
About
it
two
just all
dozen
that
of them.
does, yeah, but it only proves that, yeah, but it or helps to go along the lines of proving that the that the Catholic Church is the one church instituted by Christ because we have survived over 2000, despite the fact that they're horrible popes. And and it also lends credence to us saying that, hey, we're not saying that the Pope is on a day-to-day basis because he's not, you know. So
Why would he go
I
to
think that
confession then?
the history of the papacy only why would he go to confession? Well,
I mean, if he's
because
infallible
he
all
is
the
not
time, why would he go to
infallible.
confession?
Um, yeah, exactly right. That's what I'm saying. Is that like that's what it's part of the misunderstanding that people have regarding the papacy and regarding what Catholics believe in regard to the papacy. We know that that the human pope can and does make mistakes. Um, we haven't had an immaculately conceived pope as of yet, and we certainly will never. Um, so yeah, I mean, even popes fall prey to their human frailties. Um, so, but again, like I said, I mean that lends credence to the fact that the Catholic Church will be here uh, till the end times because that was the plan. That's from day one. Um, and we will survive despite bad priests, bad bishops, bad cardinals, bad popes, um, because that's what Christ has planned for us. And um, yeah, I mean, it's just the way it is, right? So again, just sum it up. The Pope can go on whatever he could go on the View tomorrow and have a fun
Oh,
time with those cackling hens there, and it's certainly not
oh.
going to change anything that the church teaches.
I don't know if he could stomach being around Bette Midler that long. I know I couldn't.
Yeah. I have actually never the only exposure I have to the View is when I will see a 1 or 2 minute clip that's on the news because someone one of them says something just completely outrageous. I've never seen an episode of it, and I know that I would never survive seeing an episode of it. And the fact that those young ladies are paid to give such ill-informed opinions on anything is beyond me. I don't know. I don't
Well,
know.
look, I could give a lot of really bad opinions, and y'all can pay me the same kind of money. I promise. I will give you more and more bad opinions every single day. I will do it.
What isn't it? But here's the thing. That's the thing, because bad opinions, uh, they pay the advertising bills better than good opinions because what sells controversy, uh, stupidity sells. I don't know. So people tune in to watch what insanity they're gonna share on the airwaves. That's about the. I think that's what the attraction of that show and other similar shows is that people want to see what crazy thing are they going to come up with today, you know?
Yeah, I mean, it used to be if it bleeds, it leads. Now everything leads all the time on this weird 24-hour news cycle. That whole concept itself blows my mind. Like, I don't think as humans we're meant to be aware of what's going on with everyone all over the world all the time. And if there's anything that social media has instilled in me, it's that we should all know significantly less about each other than we do. There's some of
Mm.
these people treating their social media like a weird personal diary. Like, no one needs to know these things. You can put that thing away. Just stop. But it's not healthy to be always be angry about everything. But that's exactly what you get when you turn on any piece of media that's connected to the mainstream in any way, because it's just attention grabbing and attention grabbing and attention grabbing. They want you mad so you can read the next one, and then you can comment on the thing that you're mad about, and other people will see it. And then at the end of the day, everybody's mad. Being mad is exhausting, you know? Like,
It is.
this is not a dig at my wife, but she'll come out and she'll tell me a story of something that she read and like the whatever, like gossip news kind of thing. She was like, "Oh, so," and I can't even remember the person's name now, but she was talking yesterday about Tom Cruise's daughter, and she mentioned her by first name and said something about, I guess she was going to be in a movie or she started a company. I don't know. It was irrelevant information, and I've already forgotten it. But my wife's good looking, so I let her keep talking. Um, but she mentioned the name. I was like, I have no idea who you're talking about. I'm really bad with a lot of pop culture, you know. Oh, this new band, this new song. I'm like, I don't think I've listened to a song that came out past 1979 in forever. Like, I've got like three stations programmed into my Sirius XM, right? One's the Catholic channel, then I've got 60s gold and like 70s groove or whatever it's called. I have no idea what anybody else is talking about as far as pop culture goes. But that same level of disconnect has served me well to not be walking around angry all the time about everything that's going on. whether it be with Israel or Palestine or Russia or the Ukraine or California, Mars. What I don't know what's going on. I've got enough to deal with in my local community, with my parish community, with the various charities that we try to support, with taking care of our local homeless, our local women who, opted to avoid murdering a child, keep their baby, but they're facing financial hardship or at least very, difficulties at the least in making sure they have uh, vouchers for housing, they have vouchers for their bills, that they have free health care for themselves and their children, for, free baby clothes, baby items. All of these things are taking precedence in what I've got to think about. Whatever is happening over in whatever country with some random person that I can't even remember their name, I've got no time to be mad about it. But I think that's why most people are always angry is because they're not doing anything of any significance. And the only thing they're doing is trying to find something else out there to care about.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing: if you look at people that scream the loudest about things that are going on outside of their own life, it's usually people whose lives are a mess. And spending time worrying about the Ukraine or Russia or Israel or just anything, um, or the the climate crisis and things like this, or spending all day every day worrying about that means that you don't have to look inward. You don't have to clean up your own house. You don't have to see what do you need to improve in yourself and in your own life and in your family and in your community. I'm gonna rant and rave about all these things that are going on halfway across the world so that nobody stops and takes a look at what's going on with me personally. And I think that's where so much of this comes from and how so much of this is driven. I mean, just take a look at some of the people that are usually out protesting whatever they're protesting. Um, just I mean, I don't want to say nasty things about people, but you look at their hairstyles and their number of piercings and their general health and things like that. And of course they're going to be complaining about something Vladimir Putin's doing or something because then they don't have to worry about what they themselves are doing on a daily basis, or they don't have to get healthier, they don't have to get a better job, they don't have to take care of the things in their life because they're spending their time throwing paint on a Van Gogh, uh, so that some country will stop using coal or something like that. I don't know. You know what I mean? It's all these like really convoluted things that they put their time and energy into so they don't have to think about themselves.
Yeah, and I'm not saying I don't care about all of these other things that are going on, but I don't have time to dedicate that much energy to all of those things. You know, this is not me diminishing anything anybody else does, but there's sometimes I see what other people are doing for their communities or on a global basis. I'll give you an example. James Flanagan, right? He's got the World Catholic Mission, and he's always, raising funds for this. I think recently they just got a lot of monstrances sent to these small African parishes so that they can all enjoy and celebrate Eucharistic processions and things like that. God bless that man, but I'm glad he's doing it and I'm not. And I'm not saying what he's doing is bad. I would just suck at that, right? I've got what I'm good at dealing with. You've got what you're good at dealing with, and it's no different than, the gifts of the Holy Spirit. Some people are going to be more suited for some things than others will. Like if you wanted me to organize these African missions and fundraising events, I'm going to hate every single bit of it and it's going to suck. And I'm going to try to pawn it off onto someone gullible that I can make them feel important so they take it on. because I don't want to do it. And it's not because I don't care about these small parishes in Africa. It's just I would suck at it and I would hate it. And so I'm glad there are people who are really good at it who could do a much better job than me by caring as much as they do and performing as well as they do. Right? Big difference. But I can't pull myself in all these different directions. But
Yeah, but I mean,
it's
but you're talking
time.
about yeah, you're talking about people that are actually doing something good, something that's they're putting time and energy and effort into and getting a very positive outcome. And I'm more I'm more talking about, the 18-year-old college freshman living on mommy and daddy's tuition money who starts a food fight in the cafeteria of you know, DeBinky University in Podunk, Iowa, because he thinks that he's going to change the way some world leader looks at the world every day. He thinks he's going to,
Right.
if he starts a food fight in some random college cafeteria, that the Israeli Hamas conflict is going to end or something like that. Put your time and
Right.
energy into something worthwhile, something where you can actually make a difference. And I think it
And
starts with
speaking of things that make a difference,
yes,
having your own personal Vatican archive is making a big difference because you made my priest jealous. What'd
yes.
you bring for us today? Since we're going to do another round of old relics with an old relic.
Well, I brought something very interesting, Jeff. Well, of course, everything I bring is interesting. Um, but what I brought for you today to look at is a somewhere between 100 and 120-year-old maniple, which I don't know if you have seen. I'm sure you've seen maniples before. This is a part of a priest's vestments that we don't see as often anymore, unless you go to the traditional Latin mass, because it was back in the early 1960s where this became an optional part of the priest's vestments. Um, but I have this one in my collection, and the history of the maniple is very interesting. It goes back to at least the 6th century in Rome, where it was used quite frequently, and like I said, all the way up until the 1960s. And this would be worn on the left wrist of the Catholic priest only
Okay.
while saying mass, and it was so it would be worn like this, and
Yep. Okay. I know what you're talking about now.
yeah, and it was used for a variety of it had a variety of uses. Obviously, up until the 20th century, you would not find any air conditioning in a church, and you can imagine wearing all the vestments that a priest does. You could become very sweaty, very ripe, and so a priest would use the maniple on he would reach up and he would wipe his brow. But also there was something else that would typically take place during the consecration of the gifts, and we do sometimes see it today, where a priest would be so overcome with taking place and the miracle that was taking place is that he would weep. And the maniple was also used to wipe the priest's tears during the consecration. And so the maniple has been around for quite a while. Um, the also it's very interesting to note that when a priest is vesting, with every part of his vestments that he puts on, he says a prayer, a particular prayer. And I think it's beautiful when the priest is putting on the maniple, he says, "May I deserve, O Lord, to bear the maniple of weeping and sorrow, in order that I may joyfully receive the reward of my work." And part of that has to do with the fact that this was also intended to look somewhat like the chains or ropes that were put around our Lord's wrists when he was being dragged around on the night of Holy Thursday from one trial to another. And so the priest would also share in our Lord's passion by wearing this maniple. So here we are. This is a maniple. Like I said, this one is from late 1800s, early 1900s. Um,
Do you have any idea
it-
who it actually belonged to, or just the
No.
period?
No, I just
Well,
know the period.
you've got so much. I'm like, he's gonna walk in. He's like, oh yeah, this is St. Jude's toothbrush.
I I have, well, in the story of in the garden, in I guess it's Luke's rendition of what takes place in the Garden of Gethsemane on Holy Thursday. Um, there is mention of of a young man who's there, and he's trying to get away, and one of the palace guards grabs his cloak, and as the young man is running away, and the cloak comes off, and that man runs through the Garden of Gethsemane naked. Um, and it's the tradition is that that actually Luke, and that's how he knew to write what what took place in the garden that night. But I have that cloak down in the archive. Well, I don't actually have that now, but that would be
Very
interesting.
nice lead up. Very
It's not a
nice lead up.
toothbrush, but it's
Right.
something much more
Very nice
substantial.
lead up.
But
You dropped in
yeah,
with
no, I don't have that one.
you dropped in
So that is our
with
old
the little
relic with an old
historical
relic
reference to the
today. We still got to.
yeah. Yeah. You dropped in with the nice historical reference, and then you're like, and that cloak. It's like you're telling a story of like, so this one time when Jesus was walking on his way to Jerusalem, little did most people know there was a goat that followed him most of the way, and turns out that goat's owner was my great great grandpa. You just like trying to tie that in there. I like it.
Well, there you go.
It would totally shifted. But anyway, we're going to move on to our most popular news of the day, which is our saint of the day, Saint Bernardine of
Nice.
Siena. I like this guy. Now, most of the saints usually suffer great personal opposition or even persecution, but Bernardine, by contrast, seems more like a human dynamo who kind of just simply took on the needs of the world. He was the greatest preacher of his time, and he journeyed across Italy and he was calming strife torn cities, attacking the paganism that he found rampant, and attracted crowds as large as 30,000 people. And he followed in the St. Francis of Assisi's admonition to preach about vice and virtue and punishment and glory. Now, compared with St. Paul by the Pope, Bernardine had a keen intuition of the needs of the time, along with solid holiness and boundless energy and joy. He accomplished all of this despite having very weak and hoarse voice that miraculously improved later because of his devotion to Mary. When he was 20, the plague was at its height in his hometown of Siena, and sometimes as many 20 people died in a single day at the hospital. Bernardine offered to run the hospital and, with the help of other young men, nursed patients there for about 4 months. He escaped the plague, but was so exhausted that fever confined him for several months. And he spent another year caring for a beloved aunt whose parents had died when he was a child, and at her death began to fast and pray to know what God's will was for him. At 22, he entered the Franciscan order and was ordained 2 years later. For almost a dozen years, he lived in solitude and prayer, but his gifts ultimately caused him to be sent to preach. He always traveled on foot and would sometimes speak for hours in one single place before moving on to another town. Especially known for his devotion to the holy name of Jesus, Bernardine devised a symbol, IHS, the first three letters in the name of Jesus in Greek, in Gothic letters on a blazing sun. You guys have all probably seen it. If you haven't, it's really cool. This was to displace the superstitious symbols of the day, as well as the insignia of factions. So, for example, you had the Guelphs and the Ghibellines, um, kind of differentiating and warring with each other. Now, the devotion spread, and the symbol began to appear in churches and homes and public buildings. Opposition arose from those who thought it was a dangerous innovation, and there was three different attempts were made to have the Pope take action against him. But Bernardine's holiness, his orthodoxy, and his intelligence were evidence of his faithfulness. And as a general of the friars of strict observance, a branch of the Franciscan order, Bernardine strongly emphasized scholarship and further study of theology and canon law. And when he started, there were 300 friars in the community. And when he died, there were over 4,000. And he returned to preaching in the last 2 years of his life and died while traveling. I think he makes an appropriate saint of the day, encouraging scholarship and study of theology and law, especially when you have these people make the weird claims like we were just talking about and the gross misunderstandings of theology. But like you and I've said before, it's their neighbor's dog's cousin's wife who went to Catholic school in the third grade told them so. So that lines up perfectly with Pastor Jim's YouTube channel. So it's got to be true. But no, Saint Bernardine of Siena is our saint of the day. You got to admit, being a priest is hard. I have no
Another
idea what
slow
it's like to
voice.
be a priest,
Yeah,
and I'll never be one. But he seems like a lot of the priests that I personally know who are they're like the Energizer Bunny. They just never stop going, never stop giving, never stop serving, and we need more like them.
absolutely. Yeah, I, uh, I'm certainly one who believes that the life of a priest is a very difficult one, and that we owe them all quite a great debt of gratitude. It's life by any stretch. So nice to learn about
It's
Saint
a
Bernardine
hard
today.
life. It is. And it's a hard life, but I don't think I've ever met a priest who wasn't smiling and enjoyed and loved being able to serve God as he does.
True, true, very true.
And you got to admit that 30-day vacation once a year probably a nice little perk to have.
Makes up for all of it.
Makes up for the other 11 months. If you want to know why priests drink, just go and be the one priest that has to hear confession right before Easter that entire week.
That's yeah. That's paving your way to heaven right there.
Yeah, that's clearly a penance of its own. But we're gonna wrap this one up. I'm very keen to figure out what our old relic is going to bring tomorrow in terms of old relics. But before we do, download Holy Habits on the App Store and on Google Play. Help yourself achieve as close to sanctity as you can, because as the great Father Larry Richard says, you can be a saint or you can go to hell. That's going to do it for today's episode of the Catholic Convert Show. I'm Jeff. That's Ed, and we'll see you tomorrow.
Have a good one, folks.